Hey Young Life Leaders, my name is Tierney Kearns and I'm on staff at the Service Center in Colorado Springs, Colorado. I also have the blessing to be a Young Life Leader at Rampart High School. And part of that in serving my community is also coaching basketball, which has been really fun. Girls basketball, this is my second season. And last week we had our first game, and right after the game, one of the girls who starts varsity, she's a senior, was just really upset, kind of started crying. And I got a chance to talk to her and just ask her what's wrong. You see, last year we kind of had a rough season, but this year there was a lot of hope, a lot of promise in some freshmen who just joined the team in Start Varsity. And so we were really excited. And in that conversation, she said something that just really pierced through my heart as a Young Life Leader. She said, "It just feels like I'm not enough." And my heart just sank to the floor, really. And I think the reality of it is that we all feel that at some point or another. We all hear the lie, "I'm not enough." And as I've been thinking about and praying through that with the Lord, because I think that's true for me too. A lot of times I believe the lie that I'm not enough. I'm not a good enough Young Life Leader. I'm not good enough at my job. I haven't been a good friend, or a daughter or a sister, not a good enough coach. And I think in the middle of a pandemic, that lie is easier to believe. But the Lord was so gracious in teaching me that it isn't about being enough, that it's about God and who He is. And he showed that to me and really spoke to my heart through the story of Balak and Balaam in Numbers chapter 22 through 24. And if you don't know that story well, I didn't before reading it and kind of camping here in over the past couple weeks. Balak is the king of Moab, and the Israelites have kind of camped outside of where Moab is. And so they have this reputation for taking over smaller territories of area. And so they're worried, Balak is worried about his Moabite people. And so he sends some of his guys to this professional prophet named Balaam and asks him to come and curse the Israelites so they can be protected. And so that kind of starts this whole long journey of Balaam going to God and asking for an answer, basically for permission to curse the Israelites. And every time God meets Balaam and he says, "Don't go with them, don't curse them, for the Israelites are blessed." And walking through those chapters, you kind of see Balaam edits what God says a little bit. So he goes back to Balak's people and he says, "Hey, I can't go with you." And then the next morning he decides to go anyway. He saddles up his donkey. God meets him again where he's at and says, "Only if they come and ask you again should you go." But he had already decided he was going to go. He gets on his donkey. He goes, and he's met by the angel of the Lord. And then God opens the mouth of his donkey and God speaks to him again. And then he gets there and he won't curse them, but he says, but even with all the silver and the gold and all this money, I have to speak what God says to me. But at this point, he still hasn't even spoken the truth of what God has said, which is that the Israelites are blessed. So then Balak takes him to a new city. They set up 7 altars. They give up burnt offerings. He says, "Okay, I'm going to go and talk to God and I'll bring back what he says." And they do that a couple times. And you read that story and you're like, man, Balaam is really missing the mark here. Like, professional prophet, just trying to score a quick buck. That's probably going to be a big buck, right? But is not truthful about what God has said to Balak, that the Israelites are blessed. But the thing is that God kind of opened my eyes to see is that in this whole story and encounter of trying to get this answer, God very explicitly shows up to Balaam. He speaks to him and he talks to him and he pursues him and he meets him where he's at. And I'm sure, God's mind is like, man, you didn't need to set up 7 altars, right? Like, I've met you every single time, and they just keep doing and performing and doing more and setting up more altars and more offerings so they can get the answer that they want. And I'm sure it feels like they're not doing enough. But the thing is it has nothing to do with our performance. It's about God's character and who he is and how he wants to pursue a relationship with us. And I think that's true. That's what blessing means, right? Like the Israelites are blessed because God has a relationship with them. And I think Balak and Balaam are both blessed because God wants a relationship with them. It's just, are they living into that? And so my heart was just overwhelmed with, man, it doesn't mean that I have to be enough. I don't have to perform. It's not about being the best coach or good enough at my job or the best young life leader. It's about my relationship with God and how God shows up and speaks to me. And am I listening and living into my true identity in my relationship with God, with Christ? And so I just love that story. And I think I'd love for you to leave and be encouraged that you don't have to be enough, because God is enough and he is pursuing you and wants a relationship with you and has blessed you. So thanks for doing what you're doing and for loving kids all around the world.